Under the glow of 3 alien moons, the council chamber aboard the Imperial Dreadnought simmered with unease. Holographic maps of Earth spun slowly above the table, continents highlighted with crimson targets. Supreme Executor Xyrix's mandibles clicked in irritation as he spoke, his voice resonant and precise. This primitive world has accelerated beyond projections. They dismantled the wormhole relay we placed on their moon. If left unchecked, humans will challenge Imperial supremacy within 2 cycles. No one contested him. Around the table, 12 commanders of the Galactic Army shifted uneasily, their segmented armor reflecting cold light. At last, Warlord Thazek leaned forward. "Do we request a siege fleet?" Xyrix shook his head. "No. Their defenses would rally if they saw an armada approach. We require silence, precision, inevitability." His gaze fixed on a lone figure in the shadows, a towering assassin whose carapace shimmered like liquid metal. "Deploy the Void Reapers." The figure inclined its head, claws tapping against twin blades sheathed across its back. No one in the chamber envied Earth now. The first dropships breached the atmosphere under a cloak of refracted starlight. They descended into Earth's night side, scattering across forests, deserts, and polar wastes, their hulls vanishing against the terrain as though swallowed by darkness itself. From each ship emerged long-limbed predators, 6-jointed arms folding and unfolding with insectal grace. Bioorganic rifles hummed, calibrating to the planet's air density. The aliens spread out in silence. Near an isolated research facility in Nevada, the desert wind shifted, but no human noticed the blur of motion streaking toward the compound walls. A sentry leaned lazily against a railing, scanning the quiet expanse through his night goggles, unaware that a ripple of distortion crouched mere meters away. The last thing he heard was a wet crack as a claw pierced his helmet. The body slumped soundlessly to the ground. Inside the facility, alarms triggered too late. Security feeds showed only flickers of movement, sparks erupting from panels as alien blades severed power conduits. Scientists ducked under tables, clutching trembling laptops as the lights died. A scream cut short. Another flicker of metal. By the time the backup generator sputtered on, only bodies remained. Half a world away, the United Nations Security Council gathered in an emergency session in Geneva. The air reeked of stale coffee and burnt circuits from hurriedly installed communications gear. Satellite feeds glitched intermittently, showing fragments of explosions across multiple countries. Admiral Samantha Reyes, head of Earth's Joint Defense Network, slammed a folder onto the table. Her voice was clipped, professional, but tight with fury. "This is not a rogue nation attack. Every strike site experienced identical patterns: stealth entry, total blackout of electronics, and surgical elimination of personnel." General Haruto Ishikawa rubbed his temples, scanning the casualty projections. "How many confirmed dead?" 2,000, Reyes said. "But that number will double within the hour if this continues." The Russian delegate snorted. "And you expect us to believe this is aliens?" "Come now, Admiral, surely. Pull up camera 17, Reyes barked. A screen behind her lit up, showing the blurred outline of a 6-limbed figure dismantling a tank with casual efficiency before the feed went black. Silence filled the room. The French ambassador broke it first. "If these creatures have such capability, what do we do?" Reyes hesitated, jaw tightening. "There's one option, but it's not on any official record." Beneath Cheyenne Mountain, behind reinforced blast doors that hadn't opened in 15 years, lay a vault marked only with a black sigil. 4 guards stood outside, stiff-backed, their faces betraying unease as Reyes approached with her clearance key. The mechanism clicked, gears turning deep within the walls. With a groan of metal, the door slid open, revealing a dim corridor lined with cryogenic pods. Reyes's aide swallowed hard. "Are you sure this is wise? Last time they were deployed, I know what happened." Her eyes didn't waver from the pods. Frost coated their surfaces, obscuring the figures within. Armored silhouettes rested in stillness, each adorned with unique insignia scrawled across chest plates and helmets. Heavy exosuits gleamed faintly under strips of cold light. A faint hiss of air escaped as the first pod screen blinked alive. Her aide took a nervous step back. "You really believe they can stop these things?" "They aren't heroes," Reyes said. "They aren't even soldiers anymore. They're weapons." She placed her palm on the activation panel. "And when someone sends assassins to wipe us out, we answer with nightmares." The next night, the Void Reapers struck again. This time, their target was a satellite uplink station hidden within the forests of Finland. Snow muffled their movements, and the technicians inside had no warning until the walls buckled inward. One alien drew its blade across the main console, sparks flaring in a shower of dying circuits. Another pinned a soldier to the ceiling with its claws before dropping him, lifeless, onto the floor. Among the chaos, a single distress signal managed to escape the station before the transmitters were destroyed. It pinged across encrypted frequencies, bouncing between military satellites until it reached Cheyenne Mountain. Deep inside the vault, as the pods slowly warmed, the signal was received and logged automatically. The system's synthetic voice announced, "Confirmed hostile incursion, code black. Reactivation sequence engaged." By dawn, reports of coordinated assassinations reached every major intelligence agency. Political leaders went into hiding. Entire military divisions were paralyzed by the assassins' ability to dismantle infrastructure without leaving evidence. Humanity's conventional forces were proving useless. In a darkened war room, Reyes stood over a tactical map glowing with red markers. Every new attack brought another point of light. Ishikawa entered quietly, watching her stare at the display. "They're dismantling us," he said. "That's their job," Reyes replied. "Erase the enemy before they rise too far." Ishikawa's voice was grim. "And what is ours?" Reyes looked up at him, eyes cold but determined. "To make them regret thinking we'd go quietly." Far above Earth, aboard their dreadnought, Xyrix paced the observation deck, watching the planet's clouds swirl below. Reports from his assassins confirmed 97% mission success. No resistance encountered beyond minor skirmishes. No indication that humans were aware of the full scope of the operation. Everything pointed to an inevitable conclusion. "Executor," Fazek said, approaching with a datapad. "At this rate, Earth's military leadership will collapse in 2 cycles. Shall we prepare reclamation fleets?" "Prepare them," Xyrix said, "but hold position until the assassins are finished." "This is a clean kill," Fazek. "A world erased without a single fleet firing a shot. Elegant, efficient." Neither alien noticed the single encrypted transmission that had slipped past their interference net, nor the dozen pods slowly opening deep onto the mountains. The hiss of hydraulics filled the vault as the first pod cracked open. A figure stepped out, armored plates clinking, breath misting in the cold air. Its helmet turned toward the dim corridor lights, visor igniting with a crimson glow. One by one, the others followed, shadows emerging from frost like ghosts dragged back from the grave. Weapons snapped into place, magazines locked in with mechanical finality. Reyes stood at the end of the corridor, hands clasped behind her back. For a moment, she allowed herself a single, private thought. These soldiers weren't saints. They weren't saviors. They were something far more terrifying. As the last pod opened and the final figure stepped into line, Reyes spoke softly, almost to herself. "They wanted assassins. We'll give them nightmares." Above the mountain range, the morning sun barely touched the snowcaps. In the forest far below, alien scouts moved through misty terrain, unaware of the signal just transmitted to every major defense network on Earth. Boogeyman protocol active. Deployment in progress. The hunters could not know, that their own shadows had finally found them. Steam curled off the metal as the last cryolocks released, revealing the team in full. The corridor smelled of old refrigerants and gun oil, a scent that felt as familiar to them as air itself. Commander Marcus Kane rolled his shoulders, testing the range of motion in his exosuit. The plates flexed without strain, servos humming smoothly despite a decade of inactivity. His face remained hidden behind the matte black visor, but the clipped precision of his movements radiated authority. To his right, Rourke adjusted the sling on his heavy repeater, the weapon a relic of warfare, so brutal it had been locked away with them. He gave it a single pat, like a man greeting an old friend. Still balanced, he muttered, voice gravelly from years of cryo-sleep stasis damage. You talk to that thing more than you talk to people, drawled Sasha Vale from behind, her voice low and sardonic. She locked a curved magazine into place on her rifle with a clean snap. Her helmet remained clipped to her belt, revealing sharp features framed by short-cropped hair that hadn't grown an inch in stasis. Her eyes, though, carried a glint that suggested she was cataloging every corner of the corridor for weaknesses. Guns don't argue back, Rourke said, hefting the weapon onto his shoulder. Maybe because they know better, Vale replied, sliding her helmet on and sealing it with a hiss. The banter, brief as it was, had the ease of old familiarity, like muscle memory from a time before their names became whispers on black budget lists. But the humor vanished the moment Kane raised a hand. Eyes forward, he ordered. Mission briefing first. Everything else after. Reyes's voice filtered through the speakers embedded in the ceiling. Welcome back, Boogeymen. I'd say I hope your rest was comfortable, but that would be lying. Comfort, Kane said evenly, isn't what we were built for. No, Reyes agreed. You were built for something else entirely. A panel slid open on the wall, revealing a holomap projecting rotating images of the alien assassins, elongated forms, segmented armor that shifted as if alive, weapons sprouting like growth from their limbs. A ripple of faint energy shimmered across their skin in the recording, making them almost intangible. Void Reapers, Reyes continued. Elite strike assassins of the Galactic Empire. Every account we have says they're ghosts, undetectable, lethal, and precise. They've neutralized 5 of our most secure facilities in the last 72 hours. Vale let out a low whistle. Guess we woke up because you finally found something scary enough to call us. Rourke smirked faintly. Thought they promised never to thaw us out unless the sky was falling. Kane didn't comment. His gaze stayed on the projection, studying the alien's movements with the same patience that had made him Earth's most effective covert commander before his team was mothballed. Each strike was quick, coordinated, but there was a pattern, angles of entry, timing between kills. He filed it away, methodical as always. Reyes's tone sharpened. These assassins don't conquer, they erase. Command centers, defense leaders, research facilities, all systematically dismantled. We're out of time for committees or diplomacy. If we don't stop them now, there won't be anything left to defend. Kane finally spoke. What's our operational perimeter? Global, Reyes replied. First priority is containment. Locate their dropships. Cut their lines of communication. Eliminate every Reaper you find. No prisoners. The hologram shifted, displaying Earth covered in red dots across continents. Even Rourke's casual demeanor slipped as he studied the swarm of markers. That's a lot of ghosts to bust, Vale said. Good thing we don't need to sleep, Kane replied simply. Across the Atlantic, one of the alien strike teams moved silently through the ruins of a decommissioned naval yard in Portsmouth. Their exoskeletons refracted light, bending visibility so completely that even nearby surveillance drones registered only occasional glitches. Leader of the squad, designated Spear 3, crouched near a rusting cargo crane, scanning the area with eyes that glowed faintly blue. Status, came a whisper through his neural link. 2 heartbeats within the control shack, Spear 3 responded. His voice was mechanical, emotionless. Neutralize. Leave no trace. They moved as one, claws extending, blades snapping into place with a soft metallic sigh. Inside the shack, 2 human engineers sorted through a crate of wiring, blissfully unaware of what was approaching. One glanced at his tablet, cursing the loss of signal for the 10th time that night. He didn't have time to finish the thought before the walls split with a screech and something cold and fast coiled around his throat. Outside, no sound carried beyond the cracking of wood. Reapers confirmed in Portsmouth sector, Reyes's voice cut into Kane's helmet as he led the squad through the mountain's final blast doors. You'll have support from local units, but don't expect much. They're getting slaughtered out there. Coordinates locked, Kane responded. The dropship awaiting them bristled with weapons that hadn't existed when they went under. Sleek wings folded tight, and the matte hull bore no insignia, no hint of allegiance beyond the deep black that drank in every gleam of light. They boarded quickly, each member strapping into seats lined with shock dampeners designed for atmospheric breach speeds. Vale flicked her gaze across the cockpit's instruments. Not bad. Upgrades make up for 15 years in a freezer. You're welcome, Reyes replied dryly over comms. As the craft lifted off, Kane sat back, closing his eyes briefly. The hum of engines felt almost soothing. He wasn't thinking about the mission yet. Instead, his mind lingered on how long it had been since they had stood together like this. Their last deployment had ended in silence and secrecy, buried in a classified vault. They were supposed to fade into forgotten myths. Yet here they were, pulled back into war because humanity's survival demanded monsters. The dropship broke atmosphere over the United Kingdom, the night sky streaked with thin clouds reflecting the glow of distant fires. City lights flickered sporadically across the countryside as power grids failed in response to targeted alien sabotage. Kane leaned forward as tactical overlays flashed red across his visor. Team, weapons live in 30. Targets spread across 5 sectors, 2 primary, 3 fallback. Rourke cracked his knuckles against the repeater's grip. They think they're ghosts. Let's show them what hunts ghosts. Vale glanced at Kane, lips curling faintly beneath her helmet. Missed this, Commander. Never stopped, Kane replied. The craft banked hard, lining up for a rapid descent. Below, faint outlines of the alien assassins darted among derelict cranes and ship hulls. To most sensors, they were invisible. To the Boogeymen's new optics, they shone like embers in fog. Visual acquired, Kane said calmly. Deploying in 10, the pilot announced. The rear hatch split open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the cold night and the silhouettes of their enemies slinking through shadows. Wind roared through the cabin, but the team didn't flinch. Kane raised his rifle and gave the order that would begin humanity's first counterstrike. Drop! The team hit the ground like thunder. Rourke's repeater spat plasma, rounds that cut arcs through the dark, forcing 3 Reapers to scatter, their cloaking fields struggling against the heat bloom. Vale moved low and fast, weaving between wreckage, her shots precise enough to shear one assassin's blade arm at the joint. The alien shrieked, a thin, metallic wail, and vanished into the wreckage. Kane's movements were pure efficiency. Each burst of gunfire aimed to herd rather than waste ammunition. He wasn't trying to kill them all yet. He was studying, learning their reactions, their retreat paths, their coordination signals. 3 circling left. Vale called, ducking behind a rusted container. 2 flanking Rourke, Kane responded. Push them center. They shifted formation seamlessly, years of drilled instinct overriding the long gap since their last mission. One of the aliens lunged from above, claws slashing downward. Kane caught it mid-arc, rifle barrel punching into its midsection before firing point-blank. The recoil barely nudged him. The alien convulsed and collapsed in a heap, its cloaking field sputtering out to reveal the full grotesque intricacy of its body. Segmented plating, pulsing veins of bioluminescent fluid, and a face like sharpened bone. Vale glanced at it briefly, then looked away. Ugly. Dead. Kane corrected. Above them, one of the aliens activated a comm beacon. A narrow pulse of light shot upward, disappearing into the clouds. Kane's visor registered it immediately. They're calling reinforcements. Good. Rourke growled, slamming a new drum into his weapon. I was worried this would end too fast. Kane didn't reply. He stared at the sky where the signal had gone and calculated how much time they had before the next wave arrived. His gut said minutes, maybe less. Form up, he ordered. We're not leaving until every one of them is down. As if in answer, a distant rumble began to build overhead. The sound began as a low tremor, a vibration threading through the steel carcasses of the shipyard. Kane recognized it instantly. Dropship engines descending fast, too fast for atmospheric entry. The aliens were rushing reinforcements. Clocks ticking, Vale muttered, crouched behind a forklift that had been stripped of paint by decades of sea air. Her eyes tracked the thin mist gathering overhead, knowing it would soon split apart to reveal whatever nightmare the Galactic Empire was about to send. "Hold formation," Kane ordered, voice level but iron hard. "We're not moving until we know how they deploy." Rourke tapped the side of his repeater, ensuring the chamber was clear of slag buildup. "Bet my last meal they're dropping cloaked. Bastards love making us waste shots." Kane's visor displayed faint energy flares above the yard. Heat blooms where nothing should exist. Not this time. Optics are tuned to their spectrum. Cloak or not, they're lit up like beacons. Vale smirked beneath her helmet. "Guess ghosts are overrated." The words had barely left her mouth when the sky ripped open with a lance of blue fire. 3 alien dropships, spiked and curved like predatory insects, slammed through the clouds, their engines screaming with a sound closer to organic shrieking than machinery. "Contact," Kane snapped. 3 squads, multiple vectors. The first ship's undercarriage split apart, and live figures spilled downward in controlled freefall, limbs unfolding midair. Their bodies shimmered as their cloaks engaged, but the Boogeymen's optics rendered them in vivid outlines, targets rather than phantoms. Rourke grinned wolfishly. Finally, his repeater roared, the recoil thudding through the ground as heavy plasma slugs carved streaks of light upward. 2 of the falling figures jerked midair, their forms stuttering in and out of cloak as armor burned and flesh liquefied. Vale pivoted, rifle tracking a different cluster, descending toward the far side of the yard. Her shots were crisp, each burst chewing through alien limbs, forcing the assassins to contort violently to avoid impact. Kane didn't fire immediately. His mind mapped their descent, noting angles, spacing, timing between waves. The Empire's tactics were methodical, but predictable once you found a rhythm. He aimed only when the first squad landed, their claws stabbing into the concrete to steady themselves. 3 quick bursts took out the forward unit's support limbs, toppling it into the path of Rourke's barrage. "Push left," Kane barked. "Break their entry lanes." The team shifted without hesitation. Vale rolled across the cracked pavement, sliding behind a shipping container and firing upward to corral incoming reinforcements into a narrow funnel. Rourke advanced with deliberate, heavy steps, his weapons sweeping arcs of destruction that left molten scars in the ground. The aliens tried to adapt. A pair vanished from sight completely, their cloaking fields boosted to nullify even the Boogeymen's optics. Kane's visor flickered once before compensating with algorithmic tracking of heat and kinetic displacement. A faint ripple behind Vale's position resolved into a figure mid-lunge. "Vale, rear 6. Kane snapped. She dropped instinctively, the alien strike grazing her shoulder guard instead of cleaving through her spine. She spun on one knee and unloaded half a magazine into its torso. The creature convulsed, its internal systems sparking as the rounds tore through layers of armor and tissue. "Appreciate the call-out," she said between breaths. "Stay focused," Kane replied curtly. The second dropship released its payload, and more assassins swarmed downward. One landed atop a crane, claws digging into the metal with a sound like tearing sheetrock. From its position, it deployed a weapon unlike the others, a long, whip-like appendage tipped with an energized blade that crackled with plasma arcs. "New hardware," Rourke noted grimly. "It's a controller," Kane assessed immediately, taking point for coordinated strikes. "Then we cut off the head," Vale said, voice tight. Kane didn't disagree. "Vale, flank right. Rourke, pin suppressive fire center mass. Force the rest to cluster near the crane." The plan unfolded with brutal precision. Vale darted through stacks of rusting hull plates, her movement quick but measured. Rourke unleashed a storm of plasma, the volume so intense it forced the assassins into defensive shifts. Kane advanced straight down the middle, each step calculated to draw fire, his armor's plating deflecting glancing blows while his shots carved open anything foolish enough to challenge head-on. The controller's whip lashed downward, slicing a container in half and sending fragments spinning like shrapnel. Vale ducked under one piece, vaulted over another, and emerged within striking distance of the crane's base. She aimed high and fired 3 rounds into its joint. The bolts cut through structural supports, sending the crane lurching sideways. The alien atop it shrieked as the entire structure tilted, gravity tearing it free of its perch. It leapt desperately, but Kane was already waiting, rifle braced. A single, sustained burst ripped through its chest, snapping its spine with an audible crack. The body hit the ground with a wet crunch, plasma whip sputtering out. The remaining assassins hesitated for a fraction of a second. A mistake. Now, Kane commanded. Rourke redirected his fire, and Vale joined in from her position near the fallen crane. Together, they shredded the clustered squad with overlapping arcs of destruction. In less than 30 seconds, the surviving aliens were forced into full retreat, their forms flickering in and out of visibility as they darted toward the waterfront. Not letting them regroup, Rourke growled, advancing a step before Kane's voice stopped him. "Hold! They're not fleeing," Kane said. His visor tracked the alien's trajectory, not away from the battle, but toward a derelict destroyer docked at the far pier. Energy readings spiked faintly across its hull. Vale's eyes narrowed. "That thing's been offline for decades." "Not anymore," Kane replied grimly. As if on cue, the destroyer's hatches cracked open, and thin spires began rising from its deck, antenna-like constructs pulsating with blue light. The structure didn't belong to Earth. The aliens had converted the old ship into a forward command relay. "They've been here longer than we thought," Kane muttered. Reyes's voice crackled through their comms, tinged with static from interference. "Boogeymen, satellite scans confirm that relay is amplifying signals across multiple strike zones. If they finish powering it, expect synchronized assaults across every continent." "How long do we have?" Kane asked. 6 minutes, maybe less." Kane didn't hesitate. "Vale, plant charges on that hull. Rourke, cover her. I'll clear remaining hostiles." Vale sprinted low, weaving through scattered debris as she retrieved 2 compact, breaching charges from her belt. Rourke laid down suppressive fire, each blast forcing pursuing assassins to break pursuit or be vaporized. One alien vaulted from the pier's edge, claws aimed for Vale's throat. Kane intercepted midair, his blade snapping from its sheath in a blur of silver and embedding deep into the creature's abdomen. He twisted, yanked it free, and let the corpse drop into the water with a hiss of steam. Vale reached the hull and slapped the first charge onto its surface. The device latched on with magnetic clamps, lights blinking green to signal arm status. She moved swiftly to the second location, all the while firing short bursts behind her to discourage anything getting too close. "Kane, I've got 2 left on my scope," Rourke reported. "Keep them busy," Kane replied, cutting down another Reaper attempting to flank from the left. Vale secured the second charge and keyed her mic, "Charges planted. Detonating on your mark." Kane scanned the yard one last time. "Everyone clear of the blast radius?" "Clear," Rourke confirmed. Vale slid behind a barrier and crouched low. "Ready." Kane gave the order. "Do it." Vale triggered the detonator. Twin flashes erupted in unison, a roar of energy that tore through the destroyer's hull like paper. Fire billowed upward, chunks of alien tech spiraling into the sky before splashing into the sea. The antenna spires shattered, their blue glow winking out like extinguished stars. The shockwave rippled through the yard, sending smaller containers tumbling and scattering dust in thick plumes. When the smoke cleared, silence reigned, briefly. "Relay's gone," Vale reported, voice steady but threaded with exhaustion. "Not gone enough," Kane replied, scanning the perimeter. His visor caught faint readings offshore. Large readings, moving quickly beneath the water. "They're not stopping at one relay," he said quietly. Rourke reloaded with a deliberate click. "Guess we got more heads to cut off." Overhead, the third dropship, silent until now, pivoted and began descending toward the pier. Its landing struts bristled with pods Kane hadn't seen before, their surfaces alive with shifting sigils. Vale exhaled slowly, tension sharpening her focus. New wave. Kane studied the pods and didn't answer immediately. He was calculating, always calculating. Not just reinforcements, he said at last. Something worse. The dropship's underside split apart. The pods detached and began unfurling in midair, each one opening like a flower of metal and bone. Positions, Kane ordered, his tone cold and deliberate. This isn't over. The first pod hit the ground with a thud that shook the pier. The first pod split apart with a hiss of venting gas, revealing a mass of metallic limbs folding outward like some grotesque chrysalis awakening. Segmented armor plates locked into place, and within seconds, what emerged was neither purely machine nor wholly organic. The creature stood nearly twice a human's height, its elongated skull crowned with antennae that pulsed with faint blue light. Kane recognized the shift instantly. Heavy units. Empire doesn't waste these unless they're losing ground. Rourke tightened his grip on his repeater, the weapon whining as its capacitors overcharged. Good news is they bleed. Bad news is it takes an obscene amount of ammo to get there. Stay agile, Kane instructed, his voice leveled despite the ground trembling as another pod slammed into the pier behind the first. These things are slow to track, but they compensate with raw destructive power. Vale, find their blind angle. Vale was already moving, slipping between the burnt-out frames of shipping containers and the skeletal remains of cranes toppled during the first assault. She never stopped analyzing, counting every bolt of energy discharging from the heavy unit's wrist cannons, mapping the fraction of a second where its sensors rotated between targets. The first blast ripped through the pier, vaporizing a chunk of deck plating where Rourke had been standing moments earlier. He dove forward, slammed into cover, and returned fire in measured bursts. Each round scorched patches of armor, but barely dented the thing's resilience. Reyes, Kane barked into the comm. How many pods did that dropship deploy? Static crackled before the reply came through. 17. Readings suggest 12 heavies, 5 support drones. You're looking at a full cleanup crew. Kane calculated the odds. 17 units, 3 Boogeymen. Not ideal. Never is, Vale muttered, planting herself atop a stack of steel beams to get a clearer angle. She aimed at the first heavy's exposed joint, where upper limb met torso, and squeezed the trigger. Her shot was precise, slipping between armored plates and searing through flesh beneath. The creature staggered, one arm dropping uselessly at its side. Kane capitalized immediately, surging forward with his blade drawn. He was a streak of silver and black against the backdrop of fire and metal, closing the distance before the heavy could realign its cannons. 1/2, 3. Each strike targeted critical joints rather than brute force. Sparks and blood sprayed as servos failed and muscle tore. The creature fell to one knee, swiping blindly in rage. Rourke finished it with a concentrated barrage, his plasma rounds punching deep into its cranial cavity until the glow in its antennae faded to nothing. One down, Rourke grunted. 16 to go. The second heavy unit launched itself across the pier with surprising speed, crashing through stacked containers like cardboard. Vale shifted positions just as it fired, a torrent of blue-white plasma carving a molten trench where she'd been perched seconds earlier. She landed in a crouch, rolled, and kept moving, sweat slicking her brow beneath the helmet. Kane's visor tracked the rest of the pods as they unfolded in sequence. The 5 support drones deployed a shimmering barrier that began to stitch together above the battlefield, enclosing the pier in a semi-spherical cage. They're locking us in, Kane realized. Great, Rourke said, spitting the word like a curse. No retreat, no backup. Just how I like it. Kane didn't bother with false comfort. We destroy the barrier generators first, or this turns into a coffin. Vale spotted one of the drones hovering near the crane's remains, its surface flickering with translucent light patterns. Marking target. Give me a window. Kane and Rourke opened simultaneous fire. forcing the closest heavies to halt their advance. Vale sprinted low, weaving between scattered debris, then leaped onto the twisted remains of a girder to gain elevation. Her rifle barked 3 times in quick succession, each shot slamming into the drone's core processor. The device spasmed, lights stuttering, before dropping like dead weight into the water below. One section of the barrier flickered and died. "Repeat that 4 more times, and we might have an exit," Rourke remarked, ducking another blast that vaporized half the forklift he was using as cover. "Focus," Kane ordered. He fired 2 rapid bursts into the sensor cluster of an advancing heavy, blinding it on one side, then closed the distance to drive his blade through its throat. The alien screeched, a raw, gurgling sound, as Kane twisted, severing the spinal link that kept its systems coherent. Another heavy lunged at him from behind, claws raised high. Before it could strike, Vale's rifle cracked once, twice, neatly blowing out both of its knee joints. The creature toppled forward, giving Kane just enough room to sidestep and drive his weapon clean through its chest cavity. The battle devolved into brutal rhythm. Shoot, move, strike, evade. Every motion was calculated, born from thousands of hours of training and hundreds of missions that left no room for error. 2 drones down, Vale reported between breaths. Her voice carried tension, but not fear. "Make it 3, Rourke said as he lobbed a concussion grenade directly into another drone's stabilizers. The explosion ripped it apart midair, scattering fragments across the pier. The barrier above them shimmered and cracked, gaps appearing like fractures in ice. The dropship overhead shifted, pivoting its nose toward the pier. Panels opened along its hull, revealing an array of weapons that hadn't been active during its initial descent. "They're escalating," Kane noted grimly. Vale cursed under her breath. "Of course they are. Reyes, we're about to get lit up," Kane transmitted. "Copy," Reyes replied, her tone clipped. "No aerial support available. Too much interference. You're on your own." Kane expected nothing less. Then we ended fast. The last 2 drones clustered together, smart enough to recognize they were priority targets. Vale took position for a clean line of sight, while Rourke drew heavy fire away from her flank. Kane engaged 2 remaining heavies head-on, forcing them to commit their attention fully to him. His movements were precise, never wasted, each strike opening another vulnerability. Vale exhaled, steadying her aim, and squeezed the trigger. One shot drilled through the first drone's processor. The second slammed into the other's propulsion system. Both devices spiraled out of control, crashing into the pier and detonating in twin bursts of light. The barrier collapsed in an instant. Kane didn't pause. "Rourke, light up the dropship's main thrusters. Vale, assist him. I'll keep the heavies occupied." "Gladly," Rourke replied, adjusting his repeater's power settings to maximum output. The weapon kicked like a cannon as it spat molten plasma upward, scorching the dropship's hull. Vale added her fire, targeting exposed vents and forcing the ship to juke erratically to avoid catastrophic damage. Kane danced between the 2 remaining heavies, blade flashing, rifle burst timed to exploit every stagger his strikes caused. He was relentless, a storm of calculated violence that gave the creatures no room to retaliate effectively. The dropship began to retreat, smoke trailing from its engines as Vale and Rourke's combined assault overwhelmed its shielding. It climbed rapidly, abandoning its remaining units in favor of self-preservation. "Looks like someone doesn't want to stick around for the cleanup," Rourke muttered. Kane finished the last heavy with a swift upward slash, his blade cleaving through armored plating and alien flesh alike. He stood still for a moment as the body collapsed, scanning for additional threats. None remained. The pier was a graveyard of smoldering wreckage and shattered bodies, human and alien alike. The water lapped against the edge of the structure, already beginning to pull some of the debris out to sea. Vale removed her helmet, letting the cool night air wash over her sweat-streaked face. "That's one hell of a message we just sent. Empire's going to hear it loud and clear," Rourke said, slinging his repeater across his back. "And they're not going to like it." Kane sheathed his blade, his expression unreadable, but his mind already moving several steps ahead. They'll regroup. Send more. We've proven Earth isn't as soft as they thought, but that just makes us a challenge they'll want to crush publicly. Vale's gaze hardened. Then we keep making them regret coming. Reyes's voice came back through the comm, clearer now that the interference was gone. Boogeymen, extraction inbound. ETA, 5 minutes. Satellite scans show no more contacts in your vicinity. Copy, Kane replied. He looked out toward the dark horizon where the dropship had vanished, a streak of faint light still marking its escape path. The team gathered near the ruined crane, silent for a moment as the adrenaline ebbed. They'd won, but victory felt razor-thin, the kind that could flip with one mistake next time. Kane finally broke the quiet. This isn't the end. Rourke snorted. Didn't think it was. Vale tilted her head, eyes following the distant clouds, parting to reveal the faint gleam of stars. Then we'd better be ready, because they're not sending assassins next time. Kane didn't answer, but his jaw set like stone. The Galactic Empire had tested Earth defenses and found an unexpected blade waiting in the dark. The next strike would be harder, faster, and crueler. And the Boogeymen would be there to meet it.